I'd like to bring the meeting of the Pittsburgh City Commission to order. Please join me in a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we'll open the meeting up with public input. Pete? Thank you.
So would you like to have a little prayer to get us going here? Let us pray. Lord our God, thank you for the gift of our community. We ask your blessing as we begin this meeting. Assist us with your wisdom and help us to understand and seek the deepest truth. Help us to communicate transparently and respectfully, speaking the truth in love. Please bless and protect our city and help us to be mindful of the needs of the most vulnerable. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Anyone else for public input?
William Strength, 1515 Hampton, here in Pittsburgh. It'll be 1 year tomorrow that the City Council approved the RHID for Silverback Landing, which at the time of the meeting, the city attorney said that the developer was on the hook once it was voted on. Two county commissioners and a lot of citizens asked for extension of time because the drawings were not complete, but that was totally overlooked and it was approved anyhow. It had specific time frames that certain things had to be met and done. My question is that time, and that's what the commission voted on, was them time frames. Has them time frames been changed, or are they still the same that was in the original RHID, and what is the status of them time frames? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak? Your name and address, please.
Okay, I'm Verna Lou Smith, and we own a residence at 406 Wynwood here in town. And I want to address the issue of the e-scooters being brought to Pittsburgh. First, I want to commend the city and all the commissioners and everyone on what a great job you're doing in Pittsburgh. You know, it's very much appreciated. I've lived here since I was 12 years old, attended all the schools, went to college here, so Pittsburgh is very, very dear to my heart. And for this reason, I decided I should come and share my experience with the e-scooters. I was at Fort Lauderdale in February, and on the sidewalk, when there was a lot of people, and when an e-scooter just came through the crowd, and it picked me, I guess, I was just like knocked off my feet. So I went up in the air, my head hit a trash receptacle, I was knocked to the ground, and my husband said it looked like a crime scene. So there was blood coming out the back of my head, laying on the sidewalk. I won't go through all the details, but anyway, you can guess that although they look fun and they are a great mode of transportation, the e-scooters are dangerous. And I just felt like it was my duty to come and share my story and to express my concern about the e-scooters in our community. I know you will use, as the pastor said, your wisdom, your love, and you will do what's right for the city. But I just think, you know, it's just, it's an accident waiting to happen, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else to speak before us?
Mr. Mayor, my two daughters and I moved here from Tulsa.
Need your name and address, please.
Okay, my name's Tricia Hobbs. We live at 2012 South Rouse Street, number 3101, and we live in the Edge Apartments.
Good.
We moved into the Edge Apartments in January. We had been sick. We didn't know why we were sick until my 12-year-old had a seizure. We went to Via Christi ER. We explained all the symptoms we were having. I actually had to stop working in May because I had gotten so sick. We really appreciated the help that we got from Via Christi. They told us that sounded like we were being exposed to mold. I tried to make sure I was not hysterical about that, so we started doing our due diligence and just researching it. So the management there, we were appreciative that they brought in a mold inspector. And so the mold was done in a portion of our apartment. I have ordered a second report to further test the rest of the apartment because of our serious illness. So through this process, we've learned quite a bit and discovered they were wanting to move us to another unit, but we did see the same indications of what possibly looked like mold or lack of cleanliness there. So rightfully, as a mother, I had a hard time wanting to move my children to another unit after the severity. So it's caused quite a stir. I did ask other tenants, are you sick in the building? And so I was really surprised to find over a dozen people with the same experience and the same type conditions in their apartments. I have asked the management to look into this. Their position is that there is no mold in the complex. It isn't, 3-year-old building or less. And I took it to the level of City Hall, and Dexter and Quentin have talked to me on several occasions and came out to our residence. I dug into the ICC maintenance codes, and I've asked for the city to come in and evaluate. We do have some students in there with cancer and remission, and if we're getting this sick, I don't have cancer, what is it going to do for these kids that are actually, so I'm concerned about the entire complex here. Not trying to cause trouble, just,
Sure.
We're sick, and we'd like the city to step in. I'd like to understand why the city's hands are tied with enforcing the ICC maintenance codes. That's where we're at on that. So that's kind of where the end of it's been. I am handling this on a civil case, as far as my landlord tenant, but as far as the city's involved, I don't completely understand the maintenance, the ICC maintenance codes not being enforced for when we do have reports of mold in our unit and other people with the same symptoms and the severity of it. We should be concerned about these kids coming from out of state that are sick, and they're great. Pitt State is amazing. My daughter attends, and we want to stay, and we are asking the city to help us out with this, and we're not trying to cause trouble. We just want the city involved in it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll work on that and get a reply back to you. Anyone else speak for the city? Seeing none, I close public input. And now we have a proclamation. And I believe Steve Hale. Steve, you join me up here. Office of the Mayor, City of Pittsburgh, Kansas proclamation. Whereas an accurate census count is vital to our community and residents' well-being by helping planners determine where to locate schools, daycare centers, roads and public transportation, hospitals and other facilities, and achieve an accurate and complete count on the nation's growing and changing population. And whereas census data is the basis for the allocation of billions of dollars of federal, state, and county funds for social and other programs. And whereas the census is vital to our community, in that the data helps determine how many seats each state will have in the United States House of Representatives, and often is used to redistrict state legislatures, counties and city councils, and voting districts. And whereas the 2020 census creates jobs that stimulate economic growth and increase employment. And whereas the federal law prohibits any public or private agency from gaining access to the confidential census data. Now therefore I, Patrick J. O'Brien, Mayor of the City of Pittsburg, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the City of Pittsburg to be a Census 2020 partner and recognize Census 2020 as a top priority for the City of Pittsburgh and encourage the community to place an emphasis on partnering with the U.S. Census Bureau in achieving an accurate and complete count in 2020. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Like to speak.
Certainly, I'm appreciative of the council and the city for understanding the importance of the census. I've been traveling the state, and Pittsburgh is one of many states that have declared a partnership. We have actually worked with Darren J. and members of the city staff and talked about the formation of a complete count committee, so it's not like I'm here from the government, or I'm here to help you, that the trusted voices advocating for the census come from the community itself. Darren's also got a little bit of the sway. Our biggest partner in this whole process is the Kansas League of Municipalities, and he just happens to be the president of it right now. So that's one of our best partners, and Darren's certainly engaged in an aspect of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there anything that anyone wants removed? Hearing none, I move for a motion to approve.
So move.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Chenoweth?
Aye.
McNally?
Aye.
McNay?
Aye.
Munsell?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye. Consider the following. Annexation request and incentive package. Mike Carpino, Ford, Lincoln. Consider the recommendation of the Economic Development Advisory Committee to accept the request submitted by Mike Carpino to annex his property located at 1097 South Highway 69 into the City of Pittsburgh, and approval of the proposed economic development incentive package for the Mike Carpino, Ford, Lincoln.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an exciting project that we've worked on for several months now, and look forward to bringing the recommendation to you. As the memo states, Mike and Lynn Carpino, who are here with us tonight, recently purchased Pittsburgh Ford, located just outside the city limits. And as we were talking to them, Mike asked if there were economic development incentives, because it's a big project, not only the acquisition cost, but also a $2 million renovation that I'm going to ask Mike to talk a little bit about. Ask if there were incentives to help with that, and obviously for properties inside the city limits there are. So that began a bigger conversation about crafting an incentive package that would be good for both the Carpinos and also for the city. Because obviously, just selfishly speaking, from a city standpoint, when you have a new auto dealer that's generating historically sales of around $14 million a year, that can be a big sales tax generator for the city of Pittsburgh. So that was our interest in the project. Obviously, Mike was looking for a way to defer and offset some of the cost associated with not only the acquisition, but also the yes, I spilled my water. So, thank you, Darren. To offset not only the substantial investment of acquiring the dealership, but also bringing it up to being a certified Ford dealership, particularly with the location being very near the gateway to the city. For a lot of people, this is the first thing they see as they get close to Pittsburgh. So its appearance is very important to all of us at the city. But the Economic Development Advisory Committee, as we talk about a lot, they rarely ever get a request that's black and white. And this was one of those that we came to them, and they spent a lot of time with Mike and Lynn. And I think they've come up with a great recommendation that we will present to you in just a moment. But first, I'll ask Mike to maybe come up and say hi and tell us a little bit about the renovation itself.
Yes, thank you, Mayor,
Good evening.
Commissioners. I tell you, it's a great opportunity that was presented to us to acquire the dealership here outside the city limits. And before we actually closed, I was visiting with Blake on another matter, And at that point, I did not even know that he was in the Economic Development Department. And I said, hey, before the cat was even out of the bag that we were acquiring it, I just knew I could trust him. And I said, hey, we're looking at doing some major investments near Pittsburgh in the Pittsburgh market. Said, it would be, I feel like a good partnership between both of us with the city and for ourselves at the same time for us to join the forces. Well, I like to look at things as a partnership. It can't be a one-sided. It can't be just benefit the city. It can't benefit me. And some people don't quite get that, but we do generate lots of sales tax revenue. That is one thing that we do. One thing that we're looking at, our facility was built in '98. Moved in January of '98. A lot of people realize it seems like it is a relatively new facility. The customer touch points, which are what's most important to a customer or consumer when they walk through the door of anywhere. If you walk through the door of the place, it needs some updating on it. And that's when we started talking, bouncing ideas. Like I said, we've been bouncing ideas for 4 or 5 months now. Blake and I started and got Darren involved, and Jay got involved, and we got the committee involved with it, and we went back and forth. And we actually brought some pictures up. I'm not sure exactly. Yep. We'll show you. Most of you are familiar with the outside of the facility. As you drive by, that's what it looks like. A couple different angles of it right now. This is our facility that's down in Columbus, which is what this is called a Trustmark design facility. It's Ford's new design that they have out. As you can tell, the general appearance of it just comes out a little bit better than that appearance as we go back to it. Just a sleeker, cleaner appearance when you first come. This here is what a showroom of a new design Trustmark facility looks like as you come in. It's more welcoming. They got a reception desk. There's a TV, 60-inch TV on the back of that welcome podium there with the waiting area back behind it. This here, if you've been to any of the other dealerships locally, they might not, some of them look like this. Here's what it looks like in Columbus as you walk in, and there's activity. This was taken on a normal day. We didn't clean it up and try to make it photo perfect. I mean, that's activities going on there right now. The guys just didn't want to be in the picture. So it's a little more inviting. We have a service drive where you pull in and we check your tires, and we do a complete check in Columbus. We hope to bring that to Columbus. Those services, those are done free on every vehicle. Every vehicle we give you a digital readout, shows exactly how their tire depth. If there's any codes being stored in your computer, if there's any on there, what they are. Those are free services. We do free alignment checks. All that's for our customer service. That's my wife and daughters. She's been with me 32 years. So I throw them in on every picture. That's the package a little bit. I'll let Blake take that. I don't know if anybody has any direct questions for me about it.
What's the difference between being certified and not certified?
Well, actually being certified, this is a certified facility now through Ford. At this current moment, what they will, in Ford's eyes, you're not in compliance. At this current moment, they don't penalize you one way or the other for not being, but in the future, they are.
So in compliance with just the aesthetics?
With Ford franchise agreements,
Gotcha.
franchise laws, they have not franchise, you have a sales and service agreement when you enter a franchise agreement with them, and it tells you the laws, what you have to follow and comply with.
Mm-hmm.
And those are what you're looking at seeing. At the current time, a lot of the other manufacturers started requiring it. A couple of competitors went through a bankruptcy and reorganized, and when they did that they came out and they went to two-tier pricing is what they did. If you didn't see it, if you don't go by a Chevy store that doesn't have a blue oval on the front, their cars cost about 4% more. I'll be straightforward with you. It's just the way it is. And Ford has not done that yet. We've got a sales and service contract that they can't touch. So that when they went through bankruptcy, GM and Chrysler, they were able to change theirs up because they weren't actually not in business anymore. So, but and the main reason they want it, it's actually proven. The numbers show it over and over again. The business at Columbus, since that opened up in 2017, is up 20%.
Since
Yeah.
becoming certified?
Since becoming certified. It just goes to, people want, they like services, even if you don't charge for them. You're, in all reality, if somebody gives you something free, you'll pay more for something else too. I don't mean that bad, you'll wanna go back. We'll do our services there, we want you to know we're taken care of. You know, you don't wanna walk into, I hate to say, the crappiest convenience store. If there's a nice one on this side of the street and one not very well maintained on the other, you're gonna pull into a nice one. Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
Good job, Mike.
Thank you.
So, the recommendation from the EDAC, first of all, to help with that initial renovation, that again is about $2 million renovation, is that Mr. Carpino, on the back end of the project, very similar to other projects we've done, that Mr. Carpino would be reimbursed 12.5% of the total renovation cost. The reason that number is a little different is the initial recommendation was $250,000 based on $2 million investment. As we went back after the meeting and looked, that's not typically how we have presented our projects to you. It's typically been on a percentage basis. So we just figured out that $250,000 is 12.5% of $2 million, and that reached out to the chair of the EDAC, Marty Beasley, to make sure that she was okay with that, and she said it's still within the spirit that the EDAC intended. But the city's cost would not exceed $250,000 based on the initial renovation. And again, it is on the back end. Mr. Carpino would produce receipts showing that he spent what he said he did. So that's part one of the recommendation. Moving forward, I think it's important to point out that this is only new city sales tax that's being generated. We're not pulling from any existing pot. This is all a new revenue stream. But if Mr. Carpino, as long as he remains in the city limits, as long as the dealership remains in the city limits, Mr. Carpino would receive half of the new city sales tax that is generated. Obviously, Jamie verifies that via the state, but Mr. Carpino would receive half of that, and obviously the city would receive the other half for a period of 10 years.
And you said that's around $7 million a year?
Currently,
Half of that.
the sales are historically about 14 million, and I'll show you on the next slide what that breaks down to on different sales volumes. Based on $14 million, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, it's about $210,000, 210 or 220.
That's correct, but it may
Total.
not, it may not be that because of the way the structure's set up on
Sure.
cars.
And that's something the EDAC also spent a lot of time discussing, and I know Mike knows it like the back of his hand, but if you're not in that game, it can be complicated. When sales tax is assessed and who pays it, and if a buyer from Johnson County buys it here, it's kind of different, but this would just be on the new city sales tax that's generated by the dealership. The third point there, and I really give kudos to Mike for insisting on this. Obviously, that property is not currently paying city property taxes, and what Mike has asked to do is to be annexed into the city, to be assessed for city property taxes, but then what he would do is come back closer to the end of the renovation and just ask to have the property taxes capped at the pre-investment level like we do with a lot of our other expansions. But he does want to be on the city property tax roll, but we would be bringing you a later request to basically have those property taxes capped. Based on, the city's got a schedule, based on a $2 million renovation, that would qualify him for 7 years of a tax freeze, but that request won't come until a little bit later in the year. As I mentioned to Commissioner Munsell, just a couple of additional notes. This is, and I'll ask Jamie to stand up and correct me if I'm wrong, but based on $14 million, that will generate just over $200,000 in new city sales tax. You can see ramping up to $20 million, which is where Mike thinks that the dealership probably will be within 5 to 10 years. At that point, it'll be generating about $300,000 in new city sales tax. Something else we discovered through this process is service work is currently generates $120,000 to $150,000 in revenue per month out at Mike Carpino Ford. That is That does collect sales tax, so that would be another approximately $27,000 in new city sales tax on an annual basis. And that new city property tax generation would be almost $9,000 a year to the city that the city's not currently getting.
Let me stop you for just one second.
Yes, sir.
This $27,000 in service department, we don't share, do we share that with Mike? Or is that?
No.
No.
No,
Okay,
that goes to the city.
That's what
Yes,
I
sir.
thought, but I just wanted to clear it up.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
So
Can I rephrase that, just to correct that for you, Mayor? We're split all sales tax. That's just how much sales tax the service department is generating that you get.
So we
zero.
are splitting
You
that.
get zero out of it today.
Yes, I understand that.
Right.
But we are splitting that then.
Right, we're splitting all
You're not splitting
new
just
sales
new
tax.
cars, you're splitting the service.
new sales tax. All sales tax is basically what it is.
Okay, that was, the recommendation from the EDAC just addressed new car sales.
Okay.
So I want to
I
be,
think if you go back,
want to be
it'll
fair
tell
to,
you, it'll show you all probably 50% of the
City
city
sales
sales
tax
tax generated by
generated.
my car, Ford. That's all
Sure.
sales tax.
okay.
Just to clarify, I'd rather clarify that.
Yeah, oh, sure.
Well, that
yeah.
was my
And-
question,
Yeah,
that's why I
Okay,
asked
say it
it.
one more time.
okay. Yeah, and
So you
I
say new
apologize for
cars,
the
then you
discrepancy.
say all.
Yeah, but what is
Whatever
it?
if we generate $200,000 worth of sales tax, you'll get $100,000. And I get $100,000
So Blake,
for 10 years.
what do you think the intent of EDAC is? I mean, what
We,
their
we didn't
understanding-
spend much time talking about the service department.
Okay.
I think when the EDAC and obviously Darren and Henry and a number of other people are there, so I would encourage them to correct me if I'm wrong. When they made that recommendation, they were probably focused on the new vehicle sales. I don't know that they intentionally excluded the service department because that just didn't come up in the conversation that much. It was just noted one time that the service department is taxable, but we focused most of the conversation on the new sales. So I'm probably not doing a very good job of explaining
I
that.
think you're doing a good job, I just don't know that it's a clear-cut deal. Do we need to table this and go back to the E EDAC?
I'll tell you what we talked about. It was the sales tax, we talked about how much of it you're not already getting in.
Sure. Sure.
We talked about total sales,
And I don't know that
is what we
they,
talked about.
and I don't think they would have an issue with it. We, as Mike knows, we've been very careful throughout this process that anytime there was a tweak at all, we would take it back to the EDAC.
With that,
We can do that again.
I was gonna say, I'm kinda like you, Patrick. I think if it's not gonna hurt anything, maybe next commission meeting, have that.
Does that
Resolve.
affect your
Yeah.
timeline,
Yeah.
as long as we go back and?
And
And
you're, I mean, yeah,
and-
well,
and
man,
what
it's
we-
fine with me. I mean,
what we may do is go ahead and if there are any other questions or if you have any concerns, that way we can take them back all at
Okay.
once. I take responsibility for that simply because we just didn't talk much
Okay.
about the service department. And Mike is correct that the way that is worded,
Uh-huh.
I
Well,
can
that's-
see,
And
yeah.
When we talk about the annual sales right now, that's the total annual sales. That includes service, that includes everything. That's annual sales of the business.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying,
Okay.
but I also
I think Blake
understand
got
what
it,
Blake's
sure.
saying,
Yeah.
and that is, it wasn't addressed clearly at the meeting. And I think, we're imposing on these people, the ADAC, to spend their time and energy and
Certainly.
knowledge.
Certainly.
And I think that it also goes back to a slightly modified version of the EDACs and saying, I think the fact that you passed that by Ms. Beasley and not the rest of the group, I think that is another reason to go back.
Okay.
Does anybody else?
Well, I mean, the whole group would have been there when they, Patrick, I mean, yeah, I think we need to go.
When he.
Oh, okay.
On the
When
modification.
he contacted Marty
Okay, I
about
got it,
that.
okay.
Sure.
Yeah,
On
I'd
the
like all the group to hear that.
Okay.
I
Can I
would too.
explain to you
Sure.
what he talked about when he mentioned that? No offense, Mike.
Sure. No, fine.
Sorry about the way this was worded in the beginning, it was worded that we would receive $250,000 back once a $2 million renovation was done. So after that was worded that way and it was rolled up that way, I said, hey Blake, I said, there's only one problem with that. I said, we got a great commissioner board that's on. Next year, if we have a different commissioner board and my project comes in at $1,700,000 and somebody on the board says, hey, you didn't spend $2 million. That's the part we changed. And he said, well, how about we add it to 12.5%, up to the maximum, because they approved 250. They thought it was a fair deal at 250. So what we changed was the maximum of 12.5, because we didn't want somebody to come back in and say, hey, you spent 1.7 on it, you got it done cheaper. You didn't spend 2, we're not giving you 250. I don't mean that, I don't trust you guys.
You're
I'm
gonna
just
see the
saying.
same commission in 30 days.
Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Or 14
I'm just
days.
gonna let you know why we've
Hopefully
changed
we
it, what
are
we
anyway.
changed.
And-
So I have a couple questions outside of this a little bit.
Okay.
This percentage is past practice also. I mean, this isn't, the reimbursement at percentage of cost with a cap is not new. We've done that in the past.
We've
with
done
it.
a percentage,
Okay.
yes.
And then, can someone explain just the process of annexation? I mean, what would be next in terms of that?
We'll bring a resolution to you. We've got Mike's written request, but I think it's contingent upon the approval of the financing
Right.
package, and so we would respect that. But yes, the resolution would be the next step, since it's a voluntary annexation. I think the only approval outside your jurisdiction would be the planning commission at the county level.
I have a question under that first bullet, and that is the item of de-annexation. How does that go about, or who instigates that, or who does that?
I mean, cities have the right to de-annex property for whatever reason.
Does the landowner?
Not, no, not independent of the city
Okay.
agreeing to the de-annexation.
Okay, got it.
I never knew what the purpose of that was.
Yeah.
I didn't know I could walk in any day and say, hey, I don't want in anymore.
That's what I
Damn.
want.
I think we just wanted to reinforce with that,
Sure,
like, we
yeah.
just wanted to reinforce that all this is contingent on the property being in the city limits and
Correct.
remaining in the city limits.
Okay.
I have a question. Are we already running, city services like water out to there?
If I understand, yeah, Jamie, obviously, feel strongly about that.
Currently, the Pittsburgh Port, or my Carpino Port is on water, but not on sewer. He has a sewer retention pond out back, I believe.
So if we annex, would we be doing new construction?
No, and that's one of the great things about the Kansas Crossing project is, when those utilities were extended out to the casino, they're in place, so they're already there.
Yeah, so
They're
just
new
a
expense.
general larger question, is this going to cost, are we gonna have to pay anything to do anything?
No,
Okay.
not that I'm aware of, no.
And if we annex him in, his water would go to city rates instead of.
Right, he's currently paying outside rates, and once he's officially annexed in, it would go to the inside the city rate.
So it'll be a little cheaper.
Yeah.
Where did we come up with
the
the,
check?
sorry, where did we come up with the 50% number? Splitting that 50-50, just,
We bounced all over the place with different percentages, and I'm not sure, I don't remember who exactly made the motion in the EDAC, but they said, you know what, instead of trying to get real cute with the percentages, why don't we just split it? It's new revenue for us, as Commissioner Chenoweth pointed out, we're not out any expense, it's all new revenue. Mike needs this to obviously help cash flow this and help make his money back on the acquisition and the renovation, so there really was no rhyme or reason.
There was I think the ping pong, from what I've heard from the commission over the years, a little look into what happens to the EDAC isn't always a wasted 3 minutes, so if you don't mind. So Mike sells about, I don't know, 1 million cars a year. So we're sitting down with Mike, who does sales deals every day in his sleep over lunch, and Blake, I've got a lot of faith in Blake, but we started out, Mike wanted cash. He's doing another deal in this region. They're giving him a lot of cash, and he came in and he wanted cash. And obviously for us, we don't usually incentivize with just cash. And so we started going through the back and forth. The problem is when you get into the sales, you know, he wanted some incentives and we came up with some things, but when you talk about the volume of cars that are actually sold, that's where we had the hardest discussion, because the question is, what are we currently collecting right now from anybody that's in the city, anybody that's in the county, and then if we become in the city, do we collect everything, and it depends on where they register it. And it became a calculus problem that it would have just been a nightmare to try to figure out. Somebody probably would have had bad blood at the end of it. So the idea came out, well, the one thing that sets this apart is most of our products, or most of our businesses that we bring to you are either the service industry, somebody's opening a restaurant, somebody's opening a small shop on Broadway, or an industrial user. This is a major sales tax generating business that we don't usually create incentives for. So that was why sales tax became the ball in play, if you will, and it made sense that not knowing what sales are going to be, where they're going to come from, which ones are going to be qualified to be part of this final number. If we just say whatever the number is, if we're getting a percentage of it, then we're going to be up. We know we're going to be ahead of the game. And if Mike flakes and says, honey, let's go to the beach house for 9 months, and he sells 9 cars next year, we don't want to be on the hook for $180,000 of payment. So he sells 9 cars, he's in this business, incentive driven, we'll get half of the sales tax from the 9 cars. If he sells 900 cars, we'll get half of that. That's really how it came about. It was interesting, and the EDAC, you know, and Mike, I don't want to negotiate any. We'll do it one more time to get this one clear, but after that, I don't ever want to be at the table with Mike.
And schedule.
There was a lot to go back.
Yeah.
It was good. It was
Schedule-wise, the EDAC meets again next week, so we can actually have this on next week's agenda, come back to you at the next commission
Great.
meeting with that
And
recommendation.
we'll clear it up.
I mean, I don't know about everybody else, but I would be more comfortable with that.
Okay.
Yeah. I have one more
And
question.
no offense to you, Mike, but
No, you're
I
fine.
think that,
Hey,
let's start out.
we're actually in good shape. It's gotta be, everybody understands.
It'll be a while before you get all that 2 million spent, right?
Yeah, that's just it.
So this is kind of an oddball question, but for these physical renovations, are you hiring a local company or do the Ford people come in and
It'll
do
be a
that?
local contractor.
Excellent.
How long will it take to do the renovation, Mike?
You know, I'll be honest with you, we're actually starting a new project at another place that is probably gonna be it is gonna be in 20 or the early 21 before this gets started. Yeah.
Look it up.
Thank you.
So it's gonna be in the very near future.
We'll revisit this at our next commission meeting.
Thank you.
Thank
all
you.
the
Thank you,
time.
thank you, I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Appointment to 11th Judicial District Community Correction Advisory Board. Consider the request of Matt Young, 11th Judicial District Court Administrator, to appoint one individual to a first 2-year term as a member of the 11th Judicial District Community Correction Advisory Board. Yes. Are either one of the people here?
Yeah, I know.
If you'd like to come before us and speak for just a second, tell us a little bit about yourself. Or not, you don't have to.
Hi, I'm Vicki Malley, and I am the director of the Addiction Treatment Center, which is our inpatient and outpatient services and our Women's Renewal House with Crawford County Mental Health. And I was with, I was with Mental Health for about 10 or 12 years as a counselor, and then I left and went to parole for about 6 years. And then I got a call from Crawford County Mental Health when they had the director's position open and asked if I would come back as the new director. And so I've been there about a year. And I've worked with, when I was an outpatient counselor, my office was actually in the Judicial Center. Even though I worked for Crawford County, my office was in the Judicial Center with Community Corrections. So the majority of the clients that I used to see and that we currently serve in the addiction treatment program are on probation or community corrections. And so they just asked if I would be interested in putting in an application to be on their advisory board, just to bring some knowledge in regards to addiction treatment, since we serve a lot of the same folks.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you.
It's nice to meet you. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Ronnie Light. I've been resident of Pittsburgh since the day I was born. Obviously went to school here, went to Pittsburgh State University, got my degree from there, and then transferred over to Missouri Southern, went into law enforcement, and then spent a year or so up in the City of Arma Police Department, then transferred to the Sheriff's Department, and then was eventually assigned to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation Drug Task Force. Spent a lot of times in the courthouses around Pittsburgh and Girard. Know many of the current still administration officials in both. We have our roots here, our families here, we have our business here, and we plan on staying here. I'm finishing up my time as a volunteer on the JL Hutch baseball board. I manage our American Legion baseball team, so I take community involvement pretty serious, to do the best ability that I can to provide for not only the youth, but from my experience from law enforcement all the way through. Be happy to take any kind of questions, but I just looking for something new to do with my time, and I figured this might be a decent way to do that.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you.
Okay, we all should vote for one person.
As I say every time, these are hard decisions.
All right, it was close, but Vicki, Mally, congratulations. If you guys would entertain a motion and.
Do we have a motion to approve
Make a
Vicki Malley?
motion to approve Vicki Malley.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Welcome, Vicki, thank you for serving, and thank you, Ronnie, for stepping up to the plate and offering to help. Moving on to non-agenda reports and requests.
Oh, wait,
What?
sorry.
Dockless vehicles. Deputy City Manager Jay Byers will present information regarding dockless vehicles.
Well, James is wheeling out an example of a dockless vehicle.
Yeah, right now.
That good enough?
What we're looking at here, as you heard earlier, all right, dockless vehicles have some issues with them, right? There have been issues in other cities. There's been some high-profile problems that people have had with dockless vehicles, not just the scooters, but those are kind of the poster children of the dockless vehicle world, right? The goal of what we're considering here is we're not entering into any contracts or anything. We're going to be asking you, not tonight, but in 2 weeks, to approve an ordinance that allows us to manage dockless vehicles, right? The problem that people have had, and we've done some research on these issues, is that typically these scooter companies have come and just dumped scooters in the cities and haven't had any regulations, how they're supposed to be managed. What we're trying to do here is get in front of all that, and we've done some research, we've learned from what other cities have experienced, and we've created our own ordinance that we think will be effective at managing these scooters. And James has done a lot of the research, and he's written a draft that's in front of you. Obviously, Henry and I have looked at it too, but he's written a draft, and I thought he could talk a little bit about some of the stuff he's learned, and you guys could ask us questions about it. And we're going to bring an ordinance to you in 2 weeks.
So the draft that's been in front of you is based on one out of Dallas. So it is kind of structured for a bigger city, so if it reads like it is, that's why. But it's more tailored to the city of Pittsburgh. One of the issues, of course, the lady mentioned tonight about riding on the sidewalk, getting hit. One of the big issues that I've seen in the research is that the citizens just aren't educated enough as far as how to handle them, how to interact with scooters, how to properly park them and ride them. So a lot of that's going to be based around the education campaign. You notice in the ordinance, there is a education campaign required by the companies that come in. So this ordinance would be, we'd assign a director who's going to be the director of public utilities to kind of oversee everything, make sure they're doing everything properly. One of the benefits of dockless vehicles, and you'll notice in there's a requirement about data sharing and data collection. That will actually allow us to make better decisions as far as maybe we should put sidewalks or bike trails or bike paths. We'll know better how people are using these and getting around the city, so we can actually account for that and plan accordingly. I mean, there's a lot I learned. And in that case, almost better questions, because, I mean, I do better with questions. Yeah, if you got any questions?
We got lots of
questions.
You better get a bottle of water. Okay, who wants to start out?
Oh, is that the name of the company that's coming here?
Bayride is currently at the university. They're the ones that bought the bicycles to the university. With this ordinance, really any company could, Bird, Lime, or just two of the big ones. We do kind of particularly like Bayrides from what we've seen. They're a little bit better built. They have better weight distribution. So from our trials with them, we've definitely been favorable to these as opposed to some other ones. But yeah, anyone can come in. Anyone can come in, bring scooters, bikes, whatever.
Well, I'd like to have some information on other cities that have this and the problems and maybe possibly injuries associated with them. If you can get that to us before whenever this is going to be.
So specifically, Chuck, what are you asking them for? Just some overall data? Or?
Right.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can easily come up with some articles and stuff from other cities. Would you rather have articles, or would you rather have kind of like statistics of this is how many accidents and stuff like that?
Yeah, statistics.
Kind of generalized data?
Yeah, both, if you have it.
This is all a little early too, all right? So
Yeah.
there's a limited amount of data
Yeah.
that's structured at this point, but there's definitely information we can share with you on the other experiences.
I would like some information too about the environmental, probably mostly
Yeah.
benefits, because it's an
Yeah.
electric vehicle, but I'd like to see those numbers alongside injuries.
So,
It definitely reduces car trips.
yeah. So one of the nice things, kind of for me, at least as a university student, one of the things that's an issue for me is I get to university early in the morning, I get a good parking spot, and I don't want to leave the university, else I lose that parking spot. So having these around would actually allow me to, I guess, go out to the community more, maybe for lunch, don't have to eat on campus, I can go out, kind of get out in the community, go downtown, go to other businesses, and spend money there without worrying, so.
The most important thing about something like this to me, because the police are the ones that are gonna be dealing with this, I don't wanna put anyone on the spot back there, but how do our policemen and women feel about enforcing what we have here?
Well, one thing to be aware of course, is we don't have any regulations now.
Right.
This ordinance would be the thing that we would use to give them the right to make, theoretically arrests or have a law that they could actually enforce. So, I mean, I don't know if they even have a comment.
The chief's not here, so that's a well-timed question.
Mayor, Commissioners, Lieutenant Henderson, Police Department. Generally, we do have some concerns about potential safety issues with this, and we're kind of concerned about how the enforcement of this may come out. This is a new venture for the city, though, and we're kind of looking forward to the opportunity to work with city leadership to go on this venture and make this a viable option for the city of Pittsburgh.
Thank you.
Is there anything that would, stop them from coming in here and?
Nope. That's
Well,
something.
you could simply ban them.
Yeah.
I mean, that would stop some.
That would be another article or something. Or have there been any cities that have banned them, and what the?
Oh, yes.
I think there's been a couple cities that have.
This, a city where Verna got hit, they've banned them.
she told me, earlier.
Chris, that was on the sidewalk. Now, we're not allowing them on the sidewalk.
Yeah, we are, except downtown.
This would follow the same rules as we have for other vehicles, other wheel vehicles.
So how do,
I read in here that you couldn't ride it on the sidewalk between First and
Yeah.
11th
That's-
on North Broadway. But you could ride them on the sidewalk otherwise.
and
Yes.
what's
And
the
that is
rationale for
that is consistent with current laws and regulations regarding bicycles and other scooters, not just dockless vehicles. So
So
currently,
bicycles can be ridden on the sidewalk other than the downtown area?
Yep.
Okay.
So
This is not the appropriate, I think, time maybe necessarily to address that, but in a future, maybe next meeting, I would like to revisit the fact that we have no ordinance on motorized vehicles, but not right now.
Okay.
Well, this is a pretty good time to have a discussion about, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things right now is, the idea is downtown's got a lot of people walking around on the sidewalk, so you can't be down there, but out in the burbs, not that we have burbs, we're not that big, but, so it's not an issue, but that is definitely something you need to consider because right now they are allowed to do that. And if Vera, I think it was Verna called me and said, and shared her story, I mean, that's what we're looking at regulating, what's right for our community. So don't hesitate if you honestly believe that. to bring
Because
that
these these companies also might bring in bicycles, is that correct?
Bearwide currently does have bicycles. It's at the university right now. They created a geofence so they can't go outside certain areas. It's basically around the university, goes south to the mall, goes west to Broadway, a little bit past Broadway, east to Quincy, and then there's actually a corridor going right up Broadway up to about 7th Street. So that's the current geofence with bicycles. So
Since we're getting into this whole thing, I have a question about if a pedestrian or someone else is injured by the rider of this, does the person injured have the right to sue this company? To the individual driving it, the city of Pittsburgh, or who the hell gets?
I will tell you what every lawyer will tell you. Anybody can sue anybody for anything.
Okay, that's the right answer.
But in general, there's a disclaimer when you sign up to drive these that you'll be responsible for what happens. So it's the rider's responsibility.
Well, and isn't it a point of this ordinance is to register these companies and make sure that they have insurance as well? So, I mean, it's a great question and.
That's one thing I have a big issue about, the insurance, because today, vehicle owners have to have insurance to get their license, but they can pay 30 days and then quit paying their insurance and their license still appears to be viable. I want to make sure that this company can't drop their insurance without us knowing it.
And that is actually in the.
I saw it in there.
Yeah.
Finally, by the time I got down to it.
because I believe it says they have to give, the insurance company has to give 10
10
days.
days
Yeah.
or 30 days, one or the other.
Yeah, 10 days for non-payment.
Yeah. One thing I do like about this does address the public transportation issue. I think it would be interesting, if we do go through this, to see how it impacts this bus that runs up and down Broadway, to see if it adversely affects it, or if it just services people who otherwise would walk or drive their cars.
Yeah,
And
we've
I think
been-
that would be interesting.
Yeah, we've been very patient with the entire downtown mobility, how many people, the restaurants are close.
Yeah.
And so it's gonna be very interesting, we're putting the budget together for next year, and that second bus route is one of the things we're discussing, is right now, it doesn't look like we need it, but I'd sure hate to cancel it, and then all of a sudden, people are like, how are we supposed to get anywhere? There's nowhere,
I got a question for this reporting of, I guess the rider contacts the distributor. And they have access at 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It would seem to me like you're gonna need
a contact person after 6 PM. I mean, what college kid who we assume are gonna be the big users of this goes home at 6 PM?
So I believe that contact person you're referring to is the one that's here in Pittsburgh.
Correct.
VOI does have a 24/7 access, like hotline kind of thing. Most of these companies do kind of have that. It's just, if you call that number, you're not necessarily getting the person in Pittsburgh. So the guy that's available from 6 to 6 would be the one that's located here.
But it'll still get supposedly worked on, or picked up, or moved, or whatever the hell they do with them?
Yeah.
4 hours.
Yep.
It still has.
So that hotline would ideally contact the person here in Pittsburgh and then get it handled.
There will be these will shut down. What is the time that we shut these
I
down?
don't think we said that.
We can set a shutdown
Yeah.
time for these after a certain period of time. Typically, you know, by 10 o'clock, you can't ride them any longer.
I see that they do have a headlight.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying, just headlight, no tail light, no turn signal or anything.
No turn signal, but it has a tail light.
Yeah.
It
It
has
does
a tail
have
light
tail
and a
light.
glow light.
So-
It makes them pretty visible.
Yeah.
Tail light there.
That blue light's a running light,
Yeah.
Commissioner. So that's,
So,
but it's gonna be,
They're
can
pretty
you guys
visible.
run through, I mean, you kinda talked about the ordinance, but, I mean, the most interesting thing to me, talk about how the thing works. How's the app work? How does this thing, as a business item, what does it do? How do you get it? Who picks it up? Where does it go?
Okay, so as far as who picks it up, it's a process called rebalancing. VOI, or whoever will have someone here in Pittsburgh that handles rebalancing. And what that means is they will come pick up the vehicles from areas of low usage and move them to areas of high usage. They take them out of residential neighborhoods, bring them like to the university, where they receive more use.
In general, it's an app you download on your
Yeah.
phone. You scan the
like-
QR code that's on there, it turns it on, you can ride it, when you're done riding, you scan it again, it turns it off, and it charges you for the time you used it, that's it. And then if you happen to, every night, someone goes around and they call them wranglers or a lot of different names, but they go in and they pick them all up and put them in highly used areas for the next day.
I have a friend who was in Kansas City this weekend at the art show, and he said there was a pile of these just on the sidewalk that people had, finished with and just left them where they stood. That's an issue.
So we, I know it's different and the university does bikes, but have you guys reached out to them, talked to them about their experience with this? How's that gone?
So it's been pretty favorable at the university, from my understanding. The biggest problem right now is the bikes just aren't doing enough. They're not generating enough revenue for the company to kind of sustain, due to multiple reasons, including, free bikes on campus. You can get it through other sources. So they want to bring in scooters because scooters have done better anyway, and then having them on campus, they think will do better.
Now, there's already students that have the scooters already, not rental scooters, they own them, and they're riding around on the sidewalks.
I've seen them.
Yeah. I came across a couple of them just walking through the oval in the middle of the university they're on a sidewalk, plenty of other students walking by, and they're just going pretty slow, being careful, so.
I noticed here it says, Dockless vehicle stations must be deployed on a sidewalk or other hard surfaces at a bicycle rack or at a city-owned location. I mean, what do you envision? Do you envision these being half a dozen of them sitting in a bicycle rack someplace, or what?
Something like that. It could be just an outline on the ground, all right? There wouldn't necessarily need to be a lot of expense associated with it. We want them in a place that's safe.
Are you saying on the street or on the sidewalk?
It could be either one, but if they're not supposed to be on the sidewalks downtown, they would have to be on the street.
Or in a parking.
Parking
spot.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like maybe for you to look at is communities that have looked at how these can help individuals without cars. So it's we're not creating a disparate system where people have access because they have access and funds, and, you know, some of our citizens don't have access. So I don't know if there's, I know that maybe Seattle is looking at to make sure that it's not a disparate system, so.
So one of the things I came across in research was actually Washington DC has a method set up to actually take cash. Not on, it's basically you preload your account at a
kiosk.
kiosk,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
And then it just goes onto your account, you scan, you still have to have a smartphone, and you just scan it and then use that prepaid. So that helps a little bit on, low income people.
So is your sense that should a company come in, they will probably focus this more toward the university as opposed to throughout downtown or?
Yeah, the railroad
Yeah.
is definitely focused on the university.
Yeah, and I mean, that university focus will still be there, I'm sure. Just because students and everything, I think will love this, and especially make it easy to get around campus, especially from main campus to the tech center or to the rec center. I do expect there to be some downtown though. Just because it's gonna be, it'd be so convenient just to hop on a scooter and take it, 7 blocks downtown to another business.
I'm just having a hard time picturing how a scooter would integrate with traffic downtown safely.
I could see that, like you said, on the college campus, but when you go on downtown, I'm
Pull
talking
it
about
back.
Broadway, because I have a 4-door cab pickup, and backing that out
Yeah.
is hard to do with traffic coming. I can't imagine somebody
Looking for
15
speed.
miles an hour on this and backing out and not seeing them.
Well, like these gentlemen said, I've seen people using these already on the streets. You know, I think it's a little challenging for us in cars to see them, but I don't know. Go ahead. I have a question about the fees.
Yeah.
Number of dockless vehicles, 1 to 50, $500. That's for all of them? That's one fee for all of them?
Yes. Yes, up to 50.
Do we anticipate having more than one vendor?
We're a pretty small market. That's a good question. We don't think so. I think Vail Ride's gonna probably own the market here. But I don't know. I don't know that.
So did
Nothing
we,
in here says you can't have more than
No.
one.
That's correct.
Okay.
did we reach out to Veer Ride, or if, because of the bikes on the college campus, that they came with this idea?
They came to us.
Yep. And that's how we kind of expect it to work. I mean, I don't know that we're going to actually reach out to any vendors. It'd be more they come to us and we allow them basically.
So then in 2 weeks, since we have had a lot of questions and requests for information, are you gonna come back with that information, or are you gonna come back for us to vote on this? Because I have a few more thoughts that I'd like to think through
Okay.
and share.
Yeah. So I can certainly, am I allowed to like send out emails to them or send it to you, Darren, and then you can email it on to them?
Don't email the commissioner.
Yeah, no. Send it to you and then you pass it on to them.
Yeah, we'll get.
So that
mean,
way you
there's
have
no-
it before the next meeting.
So there's
and-
there's no deadline we're up against. I mean, we can take our time on this.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
no deadline, other than the weather.
Yeah. I mean, they don't want them, they're not gonna have them out in the winter time,
Sure.
so.
If we wait a few more weeks, they probably won't bring them until
Yeah.
next spring.
Oh.
If
Yeah.
we wait. But it's not, it's not a big deal either
Yeah.
way.
And can we, when you're answering the questions about other cities and what are their problems and other communities, the carless citizens, can you give us some sense of, the examples we keep using are Philadelphia, DC, I mean.
Kansas City, actually, I know someone who works for Walk Bike Kansas City, and she sent me a link today to the ordinances that they're working on there. I'd be happy to share that.
But-
It's a little closer to home.
They
My
have
point
them
is
in
that's a
Lawrence, I
really
think.
big city.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
still a
I'm
big city.
thinking like.
I'm thinking if you
similar
can give us
size.
some sense of, college towns, and
Yeah.
hopefully under 40,000, I mean, and I think we're kind of out there as far as our size, so
Yeah.
these are all, this is a really valuable discussion.
And
Is Joplin looking at them? Do you know?
I don't know.
I haven't seen
I
them.
haven't seen them in Joplin.
I think my biggest concern is the police department and how they're going to, I think it's gonna be a real challenge for them to regulate / enforce this. I'm not, I'm not against it, but I think if we do it, I would certainly be in favor of basically a temporary, contract with whoever for a year. So we can, evaluate it, see, kinda like the bars. We go back to them before we give them another license. Have a report from the police department to tell us, how they're dealing with it. So if we make the decision, it's not a forever deal.
Isn't that in here on page 41? An operating authority permit expires 1 year from the date
Yeah.
it's issued? Okay.
Yeah, and my initial opinions on this are kind of with Chuck, just kind of the safety issue and a public that's not really used to this type of sharing the road and on the roadways. So I'd like some more information how a smaller city has performed or how that's looked.
Well, my thoughts are, we have multi-use trails, which are very good, and they were for multi-use, bicycles, scooters, strollers, electric wheelchairs. So I don't know, with a motor on that, can they still be used on these?
I think the
trails?
biggest challenge is we're not interconnected. As much as you have spent, you can't just get on a trail and go
Right,
everywhere.
right.
Now, I think people are working on that, using part of city streets as those lanes, but I'm not sure that we have that dedicated space that you're talking about.
But no, they can use this on a trail then, the trails we have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would, hopefully.
But
Hopefully
it
they don't go
certainly
off-road.
can't be any more dangerous than these people riding down the streets on those scooters.
Right.
Those are, and I understand they have an issue, but I've been frightened more than once by those.
I think it's concerning that there's not any kind of turning signal or.
You got your arms, for God's sake.
You can't, no, when
Yeah.
I was riding it, I tried to do the bike thing,
Uh-huh.
put your arm out, and you cannot take your hands off of it.
It's like a
What if you
gyro.
hit a Tilco, we have a few of them on the street, what's gonna happen, you know?
We're gonna have to hold a whole map where there's no potholes.
Yeah.
Map.
But
They actually
I've
go
got-
over, like, railroad tracks, potholes pretty well, at least these do. So, I took it to campus one day, went over the railroad tracks on Broadway, and,
When
I
I've
take out an
done
angle, of course. but-
Arm signals, I've had people wave at me. No, they don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Also, there's no mirror that you can't see
Yeah.
behind you.
Sometimes.
And there's no cup holder either, which is really irritating. But
Or a radio.
Well, keep in mind, there's probably 1,000 reasons not to do this, but I've ridden them, you've ridden them, you've ridden them, you've ridden them. Kayla Spigarelli rode them in high heels and a dress, and 50 other people rode them. And they're, for a community that we're trying to make an alternative way, we have a committee dedicated to alternative transportation.
Yeah.
That's true.
Please try to at least, I know they're gonna get great feedback, but we are a unique town, and we need to figure out what's right for us, and so please keep an open mind for at least
So
a
this
couple
is a
weeks.
recommendation from the,
So, we.
no, okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, we did approach and get advice from Active Transportation Advisory Board, Sustainability Advisory Board, Traffic Advisory Board. We did reach out to PD as well as Fire Department for their input. So we have kind of gathered input and created that draft ordinance that way.
Okay, that's good.
And so the options are we pass some kind of ordinance, or there is no ordinance,
Yeah.
or we ban them.
Yeah.
Right.
And if there is no ordinance, then they can just come in regardless of what we
Nobody
say,
wants
and we have no way to regulate them.
Got it.
So,
So it's ordinance or banning, really?
Pretty much.
Well, I'm not
Ordinance either.
opposed to them, I just think, I think
So-
there's some questions.
Okay. What would it look like if we couldn't ride them between First and 11? I really am concerned.
couldn't ride them at all, even on the street and on the sidewalks.
Just because of the nature of downtown and people backing out, I don't know, just a thought.
So,
What if you couldn't ride them on Broadway between First and 11?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, Broadway.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah,
You could
You
go
know-
around.
We have streets with bike lanes, I think that would be good for that, our trails, but unlike you, Broadway is a different.
well, we had a citizen this week back over, they had a collision with a motorized cart. So, I mean,
Anywhere, I mean, not on Broadway, just
yeah,
anywhere.
I mean, I bumped into my wife in the hallway yesterday and about split my eye open. I mean, stuff's gonna happen. Yeah, we can't just make the town.
Right, I know.
I mean, we rode that, it's, those are great concerns. The only time that I felt like I was at all in danger was when I was like, somebody's gonna back out of one of these spaces on
That's
Broadway and
right.
send me to the moon, so.
Well,
Maybe.
moved into the center.
But there's, I mean, anyway, they're all great questions, and we'll get more feedback, and we're just considering what could be.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, and thanks
Yeah.
for your hard work on this, James.
And we'll have these outside after commission meeting if anyone wants to take them around. So,
what it's like.
yeah, find out what it's like. And that goes commissioners as well as public. So
I think me and you, brother, have the motorized
Yeah.
wheelchair.
I'm not gonna do it with good pants on.
Got your band pants on.
come on, it is high heels.
Yeah,
I'm
backward.
not doing high heels either.
How heavy are them things? How much they weigh?
Chuck, you'll need to
Super
go
lightweight.
Super lightweight.
Oh.
Oh yeah.
He's in his 20s.
I mean, I carried them up the steps of City Hall. So
Good.
You're young.
They're not for jumping.
Do we have any?
You have a few things. Do you have any?
I
on that?
yeah,
Oh.
go ahead.
You know, we've had this survey by Westar Evergy that was sent out to a number of people, not everybody, but evidently just here and there. And do you all have any comments about it after doing it? Don?
Well, we didn't get it. I've talked to people who got it multiple times, so in terms of the integrity of the process probably isn't very valid. I don't know, Darren, if you've had any follow-up or?
Well, we had a meeting with the CEO of Evergy 3 days after it happened. So we definitely confirmed that some of you were asking, you know, if somebody else was behind it. I think the general sense from staff was, why this now? You know, we're operating, we're supposed to be negotiating in good faith with a company, and we don't have a lot of other companies that survey our residents and ask them what they think of the city electeds, the city appointeds, and the other city services. So obviously, when you look at it like that, there's a timing issue. We're also lucky to have a very strong team of consultants that have educated us over the last 3 years, and there's, you know, quite frankly, there's a thing called the Edison Institute, and there's a playbook for defeating communities that are trying to do what we are doing, maybe in the end. Right now, we're studying if we want to municipalize. It's called a playbook for defeating that, and it's things like that are going on. So he obviously owned that. Their CEO is a very nice guy, but he's, you know, if you're playing tennis with somebody, they're trying to beat you. And in this case, I think it's pretty clear they're trying to beat us. I guess the question that I posed to some of the people at the university and that I talked to in town was, what does this say about what we're expecting to find at the end of this study process if they're already out in front of a local election trying to influence that? I think we are owed as a community the chance to study this thing, and he acknowledges that in the meeting we had, but at the same time, you know, the feedback we got was it was just a very, you know, unscientific, obnoxious push-pull versus a survey. I mean, and I offered to the CEO in a letter following up, look, if you want to do a survey from an unbiased third party with us and really get some feedback, we'd love to participate, but it just felt like there was an agenda there, and obviously, if you look at the ways to defeat efforts like we're doing, there probably was an agenda there. So I appreciate the fact that I was contacted by several of you, and I was quite frankly, I was contacted by some people that don't live in the city that filled out the survey. So I think it was just an effort by them maybe to send a message to me before our meeting that, hey, we can get in your community and do this kind of stuff, or maybe they honestly think that's a good version of a survey. But they did it, they owned it, they didn't apologize, and they, I told them I wasn't interested in the results, and and they sent them anyway, and then they explained that they will be sharing them with the public, so I definitely think it's a push piece to get out information, because a lot of the questions were about, you know, if the electric utility was a ridiculous amount of money, would you want to buy it? Well, obviously, we're not going to overpay for the electric utility. If we can't negotiate it down to an affordable price, then we're not going to buy it. That price and that discussion wasn't in the question. It was just, if it was this, what I think is a ridiculous price, I won't say it. So it was just odd. And everybody I talked to thought it was odd, but I think it's what they do. That's, you know, their monopoly. And the question I hope the community is asking itself is, are we not going to be allowed to study something that is, you know, we spend $1.3 million of taxpayer money on every year, and in the community we spend $30 million, and shouldn't everybody? I mean, who's exempt from having to compete for our business? We've put, you know, since I've been here, I compete for my job. I competed hard for my job. The people that I've hired have competed for their jobs. The companies that we've hired, whether they're insurance for work comp, whether they're insurance for liability, and I mean, you guys know what we've gone through. We've bid every single thing, and almost every time we have reduced the cost to the taxpayers. We've held health insurance at 0 increase for 5 years, and there's no company in the state that I know of, public or private, that can say that. I think we deserve to be able to study this in our own time and in good faith. And I've repeated that in a letter I followed up with him, because I don't think that was in good faith. I think that was the playbook of how to defeat cities from doing things like thinking on their own and trying to do what's best for their citizens. So that's a very long answer to something that hit me very strongly, because I think our administration and I think our electeds, while we don't always all agree on everything, understand that we're going to work in good faith, and we're going to work and treat each other with respect. And you know, Evergy's a very big monopoly, and they don't have a business lane that says get rid of customers. They just grow, and so I can't blame them for what they do. But I hope we understand as a community. I don't think that's in our best interest. I think we deserve the right to study this and come to our own conclusions. But I'm off my soapbox. That was a long answer.
I've talked to several people, Darren, and I told them, explained them that we have approved $30,000 for public education, and that's a good thing. And they appreciate that, because they want educated so they can make an informed decision. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know what the education is going to be, but we're going to have education. So.
And it's coming. Great
Yeah.
point, Chuck. I mean, that's,
Right.
we're trying to get that out. You know, our biggest concern right now is a clear message of the facts. And when you have the person you're negotiating with come in and just kind of churn stuff up for their own, it's kind of like, yeah, all right, we get it, but it doesn't feel very good. But, you know, we all get the flu sometimes, and it passes. So I'm hoping this passes, and I'm not sure it's going to.
Anything else?
Oh, I just wanted to, I've had several questions from community members, I think as a result of candidates canvassing the timeline for Silverback. So I've been passing these out, and so I just thought I would share them with my fellow commissioners in case you're getting the same questions.
Do you want to read any of these?
No, this is just for your information. So in case, I don't know if you're getting the same questions as I am, so.
So where'd you get this from again?
The city, I mean, they had this timeline for Silverback. The questions that constituents are asking me is, you know, what exactly was the timeline? And Mr. Strength is right, it was a year ago tomorrow that we had the public hearing, so.
Anything else?
Yeah. I would just like to sort of follow up with something we heard in public input, and ask my own question of what is the role of the city in regulating things like this mold, because we've had a very, very, very wet year, and it seems like it's cropping up, and we heard about mold in the Highlands and here, and what is the role, I'm happy to hear that she's in a civil suit, but what is the role of government in regulating things like that, and how are we doing?
And Tricia was, I've spoken to Tricia on the phone. I do appreciate her. She's always been very polite and very respectful, but she has a real issue, and it's a great question, so.
Sure. At this point, our city does not have a stance on mold as far as our codes go. look to the county, and actually the county health department gives everyone my phone number, to help them. And, look to the state, KDHE, they do not have a stance, they actually pass everyone to the EPA. So, we have definitely, listened to Tricia and taken it to the highest level we feel like we can, which is now at the EPA level. So, at this point, I'm not sure our codes are based on, providing a safe, quality home or quality structure that meets our city codes. They get a certificate of occupancy, and from that point, it's,
But our codes don't address mold per se.
no. No.
Should
Now,
they?
if we were to get a complaint, and we look in and we can physically see where the source of the mold, a leaky faucet, is something, we can do something about that. But when there's no visible source.
So we checked with Lawrence, excuse me. You wanna, I think that's where you were going. What could we do? What should we do? And, you know, I'd love anybody else to weigh in on this one. This is a health issue. It's,
What if this were a Section 8 house? Would that be any different, or?
If it passes our HQS inspection, then it's safe to occupy.
Okay.
But what, we would have more recourse if it was a house that participated in one of our programs?
Well, we would have to have a confirmed result from a mold specialist that said that the house was uninhabitable.
and there's also the size, a house is a house, is a single occupancy. You're
Yeah.
talking about, how tall is the edge? Four, I mean, it's a multi, so one unit may have it. I mean, we're not gonna,
I wonder, should we go to some place like Lawrence, that has a lot of rentals, and see if they address that?
they don't. I'm looking at the.
They don't?
Didn't the college have some mold issues in their dorms? What did they do? How do they address it?
Yeah, I'm not sure how.
They get an attorney and they sue the owner. It's a
That's what-
civil matter. This, I mean, I know this sound, we're not, there's nothing that gives us the ability to regulate this. It's, I mean, it's just one of those.
So she had referenced, ICC, is that?
Yes, Dexter had, I asked him about what codes the city has
Okay.
adopted, and that's the he told me that they'd adopted the
The
ICC codes,
Yeah, and,
which covers the interior. I looked at the codes on that, and that's why I was bringing up, especially if you've adopted the ICC, the international codes, which does go into exterior and interior. Interior, we have the right to good quality air, which includes our HVAC system and so forth. And Darren asked me which codes I was looking at. The book is so big, it caught me off guard, so I need to look back to that. But if the city has adopted the ICC codes, who's enforcing that? Is it, I did put a call into the EPA today to ask, is that at the EPA level?
Right.
Who's enforcing that?
So from the Lawrence report, last year, this is an amazing number to me, 22% of all health complaints in Lawrence Department of Health dealt with mold.
Wow.
Yet, the health department, code enforcement, and other agencies are powerless when it comes to mold. I mean, there's just,
Okay.
it's just, I'm telling you, some
Sounds
things
like
are
it's
just
a
civil
civil
matters.
situation.
And so where the government can't act, that's where the free market comes in. And I would hope to keep their residents and to keep getting, new residents in the future, that the pressure on property owners would be great for them to want to fix this right. Sure, yeah.
Anything else?
I have more.
Okay.
Oh, gosh.
It's my turn.
Uh-huh.
Mine are more fun than the last. So we've got some folks here who's still hanging around. The firefighters responded to the Liberal School fire.
Bad deal.
Mutual aid, we talk about what's our responsibility to the city of Pittsburgh. They went down, obviously, that was a monster. And the chief, if you have anything you want to add on behalf of your guys and what you found and.
No, other than, we appreciate the opportunity that Darren obviously gave us permission to go there and to do that. It was was a large fire, and we knew that water was gonna be a problem. Took ladder 4, which is our big aerial, and at one point we got about 300 gallons a minute out of it, which Chuck is aware that truck can do with a 2,000 gallons a minute. So water was a real problem for us. City of Nevada had an aerial there as well, but the nice thing about it is that the high school that burned, they used the gym only. There was a lot of contents in it, which is part of the problem. The elementary school, which they do use, is only about 25 feet away. So we were able to, at least through the efforts of the firefighters there and our efforts, we were able, did not extend into the elementary. So that's the good news of it. And also that they arrested 2 people for it, so it's even better yet.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank
Thanks, you guys. Real quick, Chris Moore has been traveling. I'm gonna put him on the spot. Would you give us a quick rundown of where you've been and what you did, just so the community can keep up with what the PD's up to?
I just returned from Denver from the International Law Enforcement Torch Run Conference, which is to benefit Special Olympics. We took a delegation of 20 officers from across the state, met up with 1,000 officers from across the world, had a 3-day conference where we learned new ways to raise money for Special Olympics. Law Enforcement Torch Run was started here in Kansas. I was a keynote speaker for one of the breakout sessions, so I talked to about 500 officers on how we do things in Kansas, since I'm the state director for Law Enforcement Torch Run. And then I actually was voted onto a couple councils for some extra stuff that we're going to be doing in Kansas and around in the region. And then in a week from now, I'm going to be going to Little Rock to host a conference for the Region 6, which is Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas. And I'm the keynote speaker on how to fundraise, being the fact that Pittsburgh's been the top fundraising agency in the state of Kansas for the last 5 years.
Wow, congratulations.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And finally, we're not gonna end without talking about South Rouse, because Cameron usually takes a beating. And he's got a good milestone. So can you give us a quick update, Cameron, and we'll get out of here?
On South Rouse, yesterday we were able to pour the final of the pavement there, so all the pavement on South Rouse has been completed. We'll wait for that to cure out before we'll be able to slide over and allow folks to travel through there. We still have the curbing to go on that west side there between Centennial down to Cedar Lane, as well as the couple of intersections, driveways there on that side. And then we'll be on to the trail, wrap up the sidewalk, finish grading, and get the heck out of there.
This year?
Happy Halloween, hopefully.
I'll tell you, it sure is nice to be able to drive on that concrete street all the way down to the gym and put a nice approach into those streets.
And the guys were out Saturday in the rain after lunch, making sure they had it ready to pour Monday, because they knew today was, I don't know how anybody knows what's gonna happen, but it's, they would be another week at least if they wouldn't have knocked it out on Monday, so.
That's great.
Great job, and Cameron's, why they're, I don't know if they're still in, are they in their working days still?
Yeah, they're still within their working days.
I mean, he's the reason why, so, that guy is diligent, and, it's gonna have a good ending, so thanks, Cameron.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cameron.
That's all I've got.
Anything else? If we have nothing else, I look for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes.